Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Ignition Time. Everyone's talking about the Russian invasion of Ukraine. That's all you see in the news all the time. There's going to be an invasion today. There's going to be an invasion tomorrow. We're going to do this if and when they invade, and so on and so forth. But, folks, according to a new expert on Fox Business, Barry Knapp, he said the real story for the stock market and for the economy in general is the United States Federal Reserve. Welcome to this episode of Ignition Time, everyone. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda. I talk about the country, the economy, as well as our money. Now, Ironside's Macroeconomics Director of Research, Barry Knapp, provided some insight on Mornings with Maria on Fox Business, and he actually spoke about these escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine and its impact on the stock market and on the economy. So during an interview on Mornings with Maria, he said that the Federal Reserve poses a bigger risk to markets than a Russian invasion of Ukraine. Let's roll the tape and see what Knapp had to say. Let's watch.
Yeah, I would expect so. You had a pretty good move in S&P 500 implied volatility. The VIX index had a pretty significant move through Thursday and Friday, the vast majority of which is attributable to the Fed. But clearly going into a weekend, you caught a pretty good bid. The term structure, meaning 6 month versus 1 month, got inverted a little bit. And so, yeah, there's a bit of risk premium in the markets for a potential of a Russian invasion. So any easing of that will take a little pressure off. But you can see, even with that announcement, crude hasn't come down all that much this morning. And that's because the underlying fundamentals there are really strong. Even as demand still hasn't come all the way back, supply remains very, very tight. And so the energy story is not going to really get alleviated all that much by some easings of tensions. The real story for the equity market is the Fed and whether they're going to be incredibly aggressive about removing policy. There's going to be a debate underway as to whether they should go 50 or whether they should get more active with their balance sheet management, meaning start the balance sheet runoff as soon as the March meeting. That, I think, would be a much more surgical approach that would cause much less uncertainty in the markets and be more effective in actually cooling housing inflation. So they haven't given we haven't heard from the leadership, essentially. So we haven't heard from Powell. We haven't heard from Brainerd, even John Williams, the president of the New York Fed, who is scheduled to speak Friday. But that, to me, is the bigger, broader issue for the stock market here is, has the Fed panicked as a consequence of these off-the-charts inflation numbers?
And so, folks, pretty significant comments from Barry Knapp. In fact, let's take a look at what he said. He said, you had a pretty good move in S&P 500 implied volatility. Basically, people are scared and people are fearful that the stock market might collapse. And he said, the vast majority of which is attributable to the Fed. But clearly going into a weekend, you caught a pretty good bid. The term structure, meaning 6 month versus 1 month, got inverted a little bit. And so, yeah, there's a bit of a risk premium in the markets for the potential of a Russian invasion. So any easing of that will take a little pressure off. But you can see, even with that announcement, crude hasn't come down all that much this morning. And that's because the underlying fundamentals there are really strong. Even as demand still hasn't come all the way back, supply remains very, very tight. And so the energy story is not going to really get alleviated all that much by some easing of tensions. Now, he goes on to say something even more important. He says the real story for the equity market is the Fed and whether they're going to be incredibly aggressive about removing policy. He's talking about them raising interest rates. He said there's going to be a debate underway as to whether they should go 50 or whether they should get more active with their balance sheet management, meaning start the balance sheet runoff as soon as the March meeting. He's talking about the Federal Reserve not buying bonds and injecting money into the economy, and he's talking about the Federal Reserve raising interest rates. He said that, I think, would be a much more surgical approach that would cause much less uncertainty in the markets and be more effective and actually cooling housing inflation. So they haven't given that a lot of. We haven't heard from the leadership, essentially, so we haven't heard from Powell. And then he said, here is, it has the Fed panicked as a consequence of these off-the-charts inflation numbers. So, folks, I want you to know that I think that this whole Russian invasion thing is actually a political game by the Biden administration. I believe, this is my belief, that whether Russia invades Ukraine or not, President Biden wins either way. Why? because if Russia invades Ukraine, he gets to essentially demonstrate our force and say, hey, we're going to defend Ukraine as a member of NATO. Now, President Biden has said that he will not send American troops, but he has left some room for him to demonstrate American force, whether it's through American personnel, American soldiers, or through remote American weapons. And if Russia does not attack Ukraine, then the president simply gets to say, hey, I was the one who stood strong and I was the one who averted the crisis. So politically, I can tell you that this is a win for President Biden, whichever way this shakes out. But I can tell you that I think the whole thing is a smokescreen for what could potentially be a larger game by Vladimir Putin from Russia. And I believe he wants oil prices to go up because that allows him to make more money. That allows Russia to bring in more money because Russia is a huge, huge producer of oil. So folks, I believe that in politics, what is going on and what is visible at the surface is not the same as what is the underlying reason, what lies beneath. And I think at the end of the day, all these politicians play games. And I think all this fear mongering on news stations, including CNN, and all of this essential, risk of war and all this headline driven hysteria, as I like to call it, is a big waste of time. Now, am I saying that we are being lied to? No. But I am saying that at times the news is exaggerated and the underlying reason is hidden from a majority of the American people. I'm pretty sure that nobody wants war, but at the same time, talking about war, acting tough, thumping your chest and saying, we'll do this and we'll do that, makes the leaders, in this case, President Biden and Vladimir Putin, both of them, they appear tough and they appear strong in their own country, because that is essentially what the news is feeding us. I promise you on this channel, I will always tell you the truth wherever the truth might lead us. I'm not here to mislead you or to sensationalize the news, unlike other news outlets. I'm not going to string you along with daily updates on stimulus information because you know and I know that we're not going to get any more stimulus funds. I'm essentially going to tell you what's going on behind the scenes, things that the mainstream media is not going to bother to tell you because all that they do is try and sensationalize the news and get you to continue watching. That is not my goal. But let me know in the comment section below whether you agree or disagree with this comment from Barry about the fact that the United States Federal Reserve is a bigger risk to the United States economy than a Russian invasion, because at the end of the day, when the Federal Reserve raises interest rates, when they stop buying bonds, that's when the economy does slow down. And they do need to make the economy slow down. Why? Because inflation is increasing rapidly. In fact, inflation is making it harder and more expensive for the average American to buy milk, to buy eggs, to fill up gas in their cars, and essentially making it much harder to save. Because even if you've had a wage increase, the problem is more and more of your money is now being spent because the cost of living is going up. Rents are going up. Utilities bills are going up. Food is getting more expensive. Everything around us is getting more expensive. And that really is the bigger threat to the US economy and by extension to the stock market. And that is the point that Barry Naps was making. Let me know whether you agree or disagree with this comment, and also your thoughts on a potential Russian invasion. Please click like, please click subscribe, please enable notifications. My name is Dr. Nitin Chhoda with Ignition Time. I work hard on this channel every single day to bring you the latest news and to bring you the truth wherever the truth might lead us. Thank you so much for watching. I appreciate you. Let me know what you think about whether the Federal Reserve is a bigger risk to the US economy relative to a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching. Please click like, please click subscribe, please enable notifications. I'm looking forward to seeing you in the next episode of Ignition Time. Take care. Bye.